Hello everyone and welcome to the Age of the Ring, not with a skirmish game today, but today we have my first attempt at making a top 10 video. And my top 10 to start with is the top 10 heroes of the Age of the Ring mod. Now there are three different factors I'm putting into effect with this rating. The first is their use in the faction. So for example, if this character was in another faction, they might be better, but in the faction they are in, how well they do. Their skills and buffs for units and in combat in general. So like, do they have AoE attacks? Their attacks do knockback? Do they have insane leadership buffs? Can they buff unit experience? Can they give them temporary buffs, etc.? And the last thing is their actual abilities. What abilities are good in their list? And what could do potentially improvements, but we're mainly focusing on the top 10 here. So basically all of these heroes have at least top tier in 2 of those categories, or are a good balance in all 3. So let's begin. So first at number 10 we have the Master of Laketown. Now you may be thinking, that's preposterous. Surely this hero is not anywhere near as powerful as, say, Aragorn or Gimli. Well, as I already said, we are quoting this on 3 different accounts, and the Master of the Laketown does really well as a faction hero, and in his combat powers especially, because of his first power, the Master of the Lake. He can grant up to a total of 50% damage increase for any nearby Laketown units, which includes spearmen, the Masters of the Lake of the God of the Lake, and archers, which I didn't recruit because I didn't have enough time. You can also summon a spy anywhere on the map, which gives him vision, which, as any faction playing PvP or PvE, having map information, which is very hard to hit because it's also stealthed, is really good. That's better than needing to go for the Raven power at tier 1 for Erebor. Then he also gets at level 1, so he's one of the few heroes that has 3 powers straight away at level 1. His Underhanded Strike, which is a mini cripple strike, which does decent damage to anything, and also does AoE damage if it's dealt on an enemy unit, not a hero. And then at level 3 and at level 6, he summons his own units, the Master of the the Guards of Laketown, Guards of the Master, whatever you want to call them, which are a tier 2 unit, which he can get at level 3, and I just used a quick level up by killing 6 wargs, and he's already level 3. That is really quick. Just imagine him killing 1 or 2 whole battalions, and he's tier 3, and then he starts making 3 units at tier 2. That's insanely strong. And then that improves even better with a level 6, and then makes 2 battalions. He's one of the few heroes in the game that can summon permanent units, and now it's off cooldown again, so I've got even more units. And that when I used that in my Dale only challenge, Laketown only challenge, it proved really useful to have those units on tap every minute or 2. So yeah, this is really good power. And then at the very end, even though this power is not as strong as for, say, maybe Alert Scavenger or a Power Scavenger for Wooden Realm or Misty Mountains, having this as the Dwarves, where your late tier upgrades, you want to get a bunch of fortresses, make everything cheaper with the Arkenstones. Having just a cheap way of making money is super efficient, and he's not the only one that can do that as well. Unfortunately, Bonner didn't make the list, but the Master of the Laketown, just as a starting hero, he's only 1200. I'd say he's the cheapest of all the heroes here, and he definitely deserves the number 10 spot. So here we are again, Master of Laketown. You have proven yourself well, my friend. Look at that cheeky smile. And next, at number 9, we have the Mouth of Sauron. Now, the Mouth of Sauron at a first glance might not be that appealing. However, he is one of the few heroes that through Mordor's history in Age of the Ring has never been changed. He has always been the same, and he is still just as good. A slightly underrated hero, I'll admit, but if you look at near me, you can see I recruited some Easterling units. Now, I'm fairly certain the Mouth of Sauron has the only buff spell, excluding powers obviously, that can actually boost your Easterling units or your men units. Because Gothmog, Shagrat and Gorbag, they typically only buff orcs, because obviously they're orcs, they buff orcs, and the men of the East are kind of left out, because they're already really powerful. But the Mouth of Sauron can buff them up even more with an extra 33% damage and armor, and these Easterling archers are no joke, they are really powerful. So giving them that extra damage in the backline, or throwing down a debuff, so this is also a buff or a debuff, it can actually be worked as both. There's very few, again, like with the Master, there are very few powers like this in the game. It's not a permanent thing, because that'd be too powerful, but still, to have an aura this size, I can cover up a melee fight, and you can pretty much guarantee your units are going to win no matter what they are. Because that damage increase and debuff, that's a 50% damage and armor difference if you compare it. And that is really powerful. Also, he's one of the few heroes that can actually become immune to damage. That fact alone, similar to Wormtongue when he can escape in certain situations, means that he can just go on his horse and ride back out of combat. And then he can heal, because he has a pretty decent heal rate. I have just waited about 2 minutes for him to fully heal from near death, trying to kill those wargs. And then he also has, he even puts Elrond to shame with having the Lieutenant of Barad-dûr refreshes heroes and their ability timers. So, Witch King of Angmar uses out of the Witch King, you can now do it again. You have 2 Nazgûl with Morgul Blades, you can now do that again. Moloch with his OP attack damage heal, just finished, where you can do it again, and a leap. Is so much potential in this hero, and then just to put a little bit of sprinkles on top of the lovely cake we've made here, just an extra nice bit of Faithless and the Curse. The original Descent still exists in his kit. It's not the best form of Descent, but it is always guaranteed to work, and it will always do big things, and that is why the Mouth of Sauron reaches number 9. And now at number 8, everyone should have guessed this one, Musgash. Now, I've shown off his ability to completely power creep in the early game. It is insane. His level 1 ability, Mountain Orcs and Moria Orcs gain damage and armor, earn experience faster, and nearby allies earn resources per kill. Not only is he granting a massive leadership buff for basically all of your non-monster units, which is probably what you should be making most of the time, but then also nearby allies that affects not just you, but your allies as well. If you're working in a team game, have Scavenger when around him, and he's only 1300 to start with. His price got increased, I'm fairly certain, by like 100, but that 100 very quickly has absolutely no problem in the matter. And then at level 3, it originally used to do knockback on every auto attack and also AoE damage. They have removed that because he was too powerful, but even then, he is not meant to be an insane melee class hero. But with this, he actually is. He can fight in combat and kill most early tier heroes until you get to about 2000 resources, similar to the Mouth of Sauron. So in a fight between the two, Musgash and the Mouth of Sauron, until level 3, Musgash would lose. But once he hits level 3, Musgash would be able to absolutely destroy the Mouth of Sauron with that extra poison damage. He could get away, but he would not want to come back anytime soon. His last 2 powers, however, are where he starts to fall off a little, in my opinion. Because I play mostly PvE, I don't normally need to chase down enemy units or stop enemy units from running away. But yeah, that's basically what these do. Increase movement speed of all units in the radius for a short time, and enemy units lose all leadership and a bit of movement speed for a time. Now, you can also reduce the speed of enemy units using the Frozen Land, and that does about as much, and I think that's probably best used in PvP situations when you're trying to chase down an important hero. However, when I play against the AI, I don't typically want to be chasing down a enemy unit. I just want them to run away so I can sit in my base, gather resources, and then save up for a great late game hero, either the Great Goblin or Azog, or even both. Musgash is the perfect enabler to allow you to reach those late tier goals. He's very squishy, I'll admit, to how big he is. He is a big target, but surround him with gobbos and orcs, and he will not only just pay himself off, but he will be able to allow you to power creep for Azog or the Great Goblin before even the 10-minute mark. And that, to me, is insanely powerful, and why he earns the number 8 spot, but no higher. And here we are with number 7. We have Oglock. Now, some of you may be thinking instantly, oh, why is Oglock better than Musgash? Well, for one, he is in Isengard. And unlike Musgash, who's in the Misty Mountains that needs early resources to build up a very strong start, Isengard is resources. They make so many different kinds of resources, and Oglock, though he doesn't actually generate resources himself, he does everything else, and he does it perfectly. He is one of the only, in fact, no, he is the only hero of an evil faction that can heal units. I may be wrong on this, but I'm fairly certain I'm correct. But healing units and heroes at tier 1 is incredibly powerful to start with. He also has, I only just figured this out actually when I was testing against the Wargs, he has an AoE attack. He may be a little bit weaker in the attack department compared to Musgash or the Mouth of Sauron or the Master, but the fact he has AoE damage already puts him above the rest of those heroes, because in a tussle when he's fighting, that AoE damage is going to pay dividends really quickly. And also, he then gets, similar to Musgash, he gives units speed and experience, but that's not any specific units. Nearby infantry and heroes. This can work on ally infantry and heroes as well. So if you want to speed up a certain hero or unit's experience gain, like an elite unit or maybe your super powerful hero, just put him near Oglock, trigger the power for a small time. They're going to give extra experience. And then next, the main reason he's above everything else, on top of the fact he can heal once, he can have another way of healing. But this time it's only limited to Uruks. But they do 100% more damage. That's stronger than Shagrat's buff for Orcs and Black Uruks. But then also they regain health per attack. And this also it works on Oglock and Lurtz. So Lurtz going in with Carnage, Oglock going in with his AoE damage. That is basically everything in front of you is going to die. Then you can trample down the enemy archers with wargs, and so on and so forth. And even if Oglock is somehow caught on his own, if he's leveled up enough, he can summon units to help protect him. And then they can get all of these buffs. He literally cannot be stopped. He is a killing machine. And also, again, only hero that can heal for an evil faction. He is incredibly powerful, but unfortunately, the top 6 trump Oglock. And I must say, they must be very powerful heroes to get past him. And here we are at number 6. We have Aragorn, and more particularly Strider. Now, the thing with Aragorn is, I originally didn't want to put him in this list because half of his power comes from this upgrade, which is Anduril Flame of the West. So without that upgrade, a lot of his true power is locked behind that sword. But once you get it, oh my gosh, there is no stopping you. So firstly, he has AoE damage. He attacks pretty decent. He attacks at a very decent speed. He does about the same amount of damage as Oglock, but attacks faster. He can also toggle between a sword and a bow, but to be fair, I never use his bow form. He is always best on his sword. He gets King's Foil, so he's similar to Oglock in that regard, except it only works on heroes, which is fine because Imladris has a great deal of healing anyway. They're not the kind of faction that needs more healing, but having a little bit of it is really good. Then boosting all Dunedain nearby by a great deal with attack power is really good. And then being able to do it again even later at level 9. And then he also gets an ability that makes all nearby units, not just humans, but all units, doesn't matter what it is. It's a friendly unit, it's getting a buff of damage, armor, and immunity to fear. So Cloud Break ain't going to stop you. Balrog ain't going to stop you. In fact, I've shown off in my most recent Imladris video that you just have no fear with Aragorn anywhere. He also moves super fast and can make other units move faster at level 3. So that's another passive buff. Now, I don't like the other side of it, the extra attack, vision range, and range for his bow, because he doesn't really attack very fast on his bow, and it doesn't do AoE damage. So I'm going to focus entirely upon the part where he uses his sword. And then at level 6, I didn't quite get him to level 6, but he does level up a lot slower than the other heroes I've had on this list so far. But once he hits level 6, he gets Blade Master. That's right, he's so OP from the base game, having Blade Master at level 2, they had to cut it down to level 6 just so he would not be so goddamn powerful. But he gets massive damage increase, bit of armor, and nearby heroes gain armor as well. As if that needed to be a additional buff. It's just a bit of icing on the cake, but it's beautiful. And then we come to Andúril's power. So once you have Andúril, which for one requires a purchase from the library, and then a purchase from a level 3 Eregion Forge. You're not going to get this in the early game. It's going to take a while for you to get this, but when you do get it, you're getting an extra 40% magic damage. So elemental units such as I'm fairly certain the Necromancer, the Balrog are the only two I can think of. But yeah, basically anything that's weak to magic damage is going to take incredible amounts of damage. But then on top of that, he also gets plus 50 damage against heroes. So if he's doing 100 damage on base, that's an extra 50 against heroes, an extra 40 magic damage, which can increase depending on what he's fighting. Does an extra 75% damage when he's using a Fire Shall Be Woken. On top of the fact he does AoE damage, he could pretty much fight any single hero in the game, or even multiple heroes in the game, and come out victorious. In fact, if he had resistance to knockback, I'd say he could beat Sauron ring mode. No joke, I think he could do it. I've seen it happen before in vanilla. I believe it could happen in Age of the Ring. However, as I said, he's not high up in this list because you do require the upgrade for Andúril to get this, and he is a very strong starting hero and becomes even greater in the late game, but every other hero on this list does that just that little bit better. So who could it be? Who's next? And now here we are to number 5 and number 4, with Celeborn at number 5 and Galadriel taking the spot at number 4 above him. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because we're starting to get into the expensive heroes now. Before this, every hero was below 2,000. But here you have Celeborn at 3,000 resources and Galadriel at 4,000 resources. The two faction leaders of Lothlorien taking 5th and 4th spots, and this is why. Firstly, we go to Celeborn's abilities. His first ability when he gets into the game is a heal. Now, Oglock got number 7 mainly because of that heal and his other abilities. But here is where Celeborn gets even better than Oglock. Level 4, Cunning Warrior. Briefly absorbs all damage towards him. I thought Idain's Celeborn was overpowered, but this makes him, without a doubt, the strongest killer in the game. Above Sauron, I'd say. If he was immune to all knockback, like Aragorn could be, then he would be the strongest killer in the game. Because he not only has AoE damage, he does more damage than Aragorn at base. Yes, not as much damage at the very end, but he still does more damage at base. But then also all enemies around him lose damage and armor. So that's a debuff on top of immunity, which is insane. And when coupled with Galadriel, this power, once used, will remain active until the recharge timer resets. So you could have a permanently immune to damage Celeborn if you micromanage the two well enough, which it is not hard to do. I only just recently learnt this, but look how quickly that power is coming back thanks to Galadriel, but we'll come to her soon. So then also he gets his armor. As you can see there, he not just wearing white pajamas, which gives him even more armor, which with a hero, as a hero that gives healing, having armor over damage is much more important. But also he also deals magic damage, so he can also clean out a Balrog on his own if he wasn't going to get knocked back constantly by his swinging animation. But then at level 7, and technically at level 3 from the Lord of the Galadriel ability, he gets some Wardens of the Silver Tree, your strongest archer unit. And then at level 7, you can summon a small unit of them to surround an ally hero, which could be Galadriel, it could be any hero that you can imagine, including Celeborn. Just give him extra archers which will stand and fight and can kill most basic infantry in 1 or 2 shots. And this is 3 of them. So they could actually clean out a whole battalion on their own if Celeborn needs to run away for some reason. But then also he gives units great experience. Not only do elves, once they reach level 2, have healing over time, but they can replenish their units without needing a well. So even Celeborn's heal is better. So with him around, your units are near unbreakable, unkillable, and then once you get Galadriel, you are pretty much unstoppable to most foes. It would take a lot of power and strategy to be able to beat this combination. And here we come over to Galadriel. So the reason why she is above Celeborn is not because of her being the faction leader and all that, but actually because of everything about her makes Lothlorien so strong. Her AoE attack damage, her basic attack, is the strongest in the game. It may not be massive damage, but it is a whole area around her. Using Farsight as an example, that area, this area around her, wherever she attacks, basically everything in this area, whether they like it or not, is going to get knocked back, is going to take damage, so they can't fight back, and she can constantly do this over and over and over again. It's not like back in vanilla BFME 2 where she kicks and everything goes flying. It's a AoE wave that does minor damage, but is constant and is all around her. So you can't surround her and think, okay, we've got her surrounded, she can't turn around, we're going to win. She was always going to knock you down, you cannot escape that. And heroes are her only weakness, which is why you have Celeborn, which does so much value. And then at level 3 is one of her best powers and makes the faction of Lothlorien a whole incredibly insane. Grants nearby friendly heroes a massive experience gain, and as I mentioned, recharge timers are reduced in speed. So Celeborn could be immune forever, his heal comes back more regularly, his experience gain comes back more regularly, and if you had more heroes around you, including ally heroes, it may not be like the Mouth of Sauron with his insta reset of your powers, or Elrond with the insta reset of powers, but having the ability to get them back all the time, much faster, is one of the best things in the game. And also she weakens nearby heroes around her with a damage decrease. Mix that in with Celeborn's, and heroes are doing half damage. That reduces Aragorn back to doing base damage against heroes, which is, again, really, 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 really strong. And then she can even make buildings immune, and those buildings get a massive armor increase. So if you're defending, you're probably never going to lose unless you're being sieged down by everything and not just one faction. One army alone would not be able to destroy a Lothlorien forces when buffed by Galadriel, is being defended by Galadriel, and an army of Galafrim. Then, as I said, Sauron is not the only hero that gets immunity. Galadriel is as well. And it's not only an immunity, but it's also a fear effect. And fear effects in Age of the Ring are very, very powerful because they send units away in a large area, and then they can't do anything. So she's a incredibly powerful unit destructive hero. And then at the very end, I don't really like this power very much. Yes, it's very powerful. It makes her damage so much stronger for a temporary amount of time. However, it does not really complement the Lothlorien faction's way of doing things, which is slow and steady, constant healing, preservation, and slowly just bringing down your enemy with sheer force. Galadriel, I will admit this power is very strong. It is very, very strong, and it should not be underestimated. But going for something like Ents is a lot better. Galadriel's early powers is what makes her so strong, and the fact she gets this in the late game just proves why she is the strongest and one of the wisest elves of Middle-earth. However, she did not quite make the top 3, because these 3 heroes are really something else. And now we come to the top 3, with number 3 being the King of the Woodland Realm, Thranduil. Now, what makes Thranduil stronger than Celeborn and Galadriel put together, you may ask? Well, not much, actually. Except that, as a whole, his faction struggles more in the late game without him than if he isn't there. So basically, without Thranduil, in your late game, you will start to struggle a bit. And that mainly becomes apparent because of the love of silver jewels. He gives Sindarin armor to nearby units. So if it wasn't obvious from the amount of times I've played as the Woodland Realm and the amount of times someone else has made play the Woodland Realm, you only get to purchase silver and steel and banner carriers. You do not have access to armor. Thranduil is the only way your units will ever gain armor. And not only do they look different, it is so appealing to actually go for this kind of upgrade. Because he gives a 20% increase to armor, which is basically around the same amount as of an upgrade of normal armor, if not slightly better. So maybe having Thranduil in your army to begin with may not be that big. But in the late game, when you level him up properly, because this power scales, at higher levels, it's a larger radius, more units can gain armor, you can turn your army of middle tier elven archers or late tier elven spearmen or swordsmen with very strong attack but very weak armor and turn them into absolute powerhouses, because Thranduil also gives at level 1 a 50% armor increase. So comparing them to Lothlorien, who is already a more defensive based faction, the Woodland Realm is a more aggressive faction that typically goes towards a more aggressive playstyle. They have cheaper units, they have low-level elven scout-like heroes, or not heroes but units, that though they are really good, they are also very squishy. So if they get trampled by a wild Warg unit from Isengard or Misty Mountains, or a elite cavalry unit, they're not going to survive. Where a Lothlorien unit would, because they're constantly gaining lots of buffs from just being Lothlorien, and lots of healing. But Thranduil, he is the counterpart to that. You start out being more aggressive and all outward, but once you get the king, your units suddenly just stop becoming weak and squishy and start becoming really tough. And then they actually become stronger than almost every other unit in the game. In Largest Elves, they get a lot of good buffs from their heroes, but the heroes typically buff other heroes in Enlargerous and your lower tier units. Where in Lothlorien, for example, everything is based around healing and preservation and defense, so you lack in attack damage. But then with Thranduil and the Woodland Realm, you go all attack, you lack defense, But that defense will not be gone forever, because once you start getting this Sylvan armor for your units, they just suddenly become the strongest elves in the game. And only the Noldor veterans can take that title away from them. Also, unlike with Musgash's level 8 ability to reduce the speed of all units around in an area, Thranduil can do that too, but in a larger radius, and as an extra caveat, he also deals damage to those units that walk in this area. That makes for an incredibly dangerous playstyle to walk through that and take the damage, because then your Wooden Realm units can easily pick them out and clean them out of the area, which is in itself a very high risk, high reward, a high risk, low reward playstyle, and only the AI can really say, oh, I don't care, because a player would instantly see that and want to run away to a safe distance, which they can't really do because the Elves of the Wooden Realm are very fast and again do massive damage. And then we come to a power that scales straight from level 5 all the way down to level 10 to eventually becoming permanent armor, speed, extra damage, crush deceleration, so any cavalry is going to do absolutely nothing. And then he also becomes like Celeborn and absorbs all damage towards him. Yes, he doesn't get it at level 4 like Celeborn does, so he's not the perfect hero killer. But that's the point. Thranduil is meant to buff the faction incredibly, and he does that so well. He's not only a powerful faction leader because of his love of silver and jewels, but he can also turn the tide of a battle with None May Enter and his renowned warrior. And then, last of all, his memory of Mordor. So not only are you giving your units 50% extra armor, but when you use this power, he becomes invulnerable, and all enemies lose leadership and deal 50% less damage. That is a insane damage debuff. No other debuff in the game brings an enemy's attack damage down by 50%. And not only that, all units in the area take damage. So he is also like the late tier power of Lothlorien. He is the Mist of Lorien, in where he has a large AoE around him, dealing constant damage. Add that onto None May Enter. So if anyone comes into an area you're trying to defend, if you're going up against a massive army of elite troops and you don't feel like you can hold out, just pop Memory of Mordor. They will soon either run away or they will quickly die. You may not have as many preservation skills with Thranduil alone, but as a faction, Mirkwood can hold their own better than anyone else if everything is lined up correctly, which puts Thranduil at number 3. And now we have at number 2 another great king, King Theoden. Now a lot of people are going to be a bit irate at this because, oh, why Theoden? Why is he suddenly so powerful? How has he gotten so good? How is he number 2? Well, to put it simply, he is just that good. Theoden, even since BFME 1, has been one of the best heroes of Battle for Middle-earth. Incredibly underrated. And it's all because of, in this mod, Rise of Theoden, as it is known originally in the very first BFME 1, Glorious Charge. Theoden must be mounted to use his ability, but then, once used, Theoden and nearby cavalry gain 100% armor. The more riders near Theoden, the larger the bonus. 10% armor per battalion, and no force can slow this charge. So if you didn't know, the reason why cavalry fall so quickly to pikes is not because of there's just some coding in the game that says, okay, when cavalry charges into pikes, they get dealt a lot of damage. It's because these cavalry have zero armor against pikes. The armor they gain from Rise of Theoden and from the King of Rohan is, however, taken into account against pikes. So if a regular unit of Snowborn Riders was to run into a pike unit, they would more than likely die. But with Theoden around, they would take roughly, I'd say, a fifth of the damage taken away from them. And then with Rise of Theoden, If there were 10 units of Rise of Snowborn here, that's an extra 200% armor, including on Theoden himself, so he won't die in the charge. 250% armor against pikes is insane. Is insanely strong. Nothing can slow it down. Everything will get charged down. Nothing can stop it. If anything takes damage, you can full heal. It says heal nearby units. This is the one heal in the game that is not just a heal to a certain point, like heal 1,000 hit points. This is a, you will always get healed to full power. Unless you're like at 10,000 health, then you may not, you heal for like half your health. But still, a 5,000 health heal on most heroes that have been around 3,000 health, that is still a full heal. And another reason why Theoden is so high on the list, although he does not have AoE attack damage, he has incredibly fast experience gain. He has, I'd say, slightly faster experience gain than some of the heroes at the very bottom of the list. And all the heroes so far, Aragorn, Celeborn, Galadriel and Thranduil, they had very slow experience gain. Theoden had an incredibly high experience gain. And on his horse, he is incredibly tough. You cannot bring him down easily. And like with Celeborn, he can give units large experience. Which, granted, is not as powerful with Rohan, but it is still there, and that power alone gives a great buff. And this heal, once you reach level 5, can summon Gamling, Hammer, and a unit of Kingsguard. No, 2 units of Kingsguard. So now, let's glorious charge our way to victory against an AI that doesn't exist. So as you can see, it doesn't affect Gamling and Hammer themselves, but all those heroes, all those units right there, that is 170% increased armor. That charge is not going to slow for anything. Not even a Balrog would stop it. And that is what makes Theoden number 2 on the top 10 heroes of Age of the Ring, in my honest opinion. Some of you may think I'm completely wrong, but Theoden has always been the same. He has always been the leader, the king of Rohan. He has always been known for his glorious charge at Pelennor, and he will always remain this incredibly powerful cavalry buffing hero that, yes, it may not be like Airman that gives Scavenger, but in the late game, that glorious charge into an enemy base will clean out a fortress, clean out half the recruitment buildings before the glorious charge even ends, if it's used properly. If used properly, you don't even need siege equipment to win a game with Theoden. That is not a joke. I have done it without needing any siege equipment. And this can be done as clean as easy from level 5. You don't need to be level 10 for things like Memory of Mordor. You don't need to be... don't need to have all your heroes to have an incredibly powerful rush. The only weakness is that Strength Remembered and Rise of Theoden have incredibly large cooldown times. So if you were to have a Galadriel on your team, that would be a near unstoppable combination. But yeah, that is my reasoning for Theoden being number 2. So, who is number 1? And now we come on to number 1. The one and only, the Dark Lord, the Necromancer. So what makes him the strongest hero in the game? For his faction strength, his abilities in combat, and his abilities in general. Well, let's begin with his first ability, the Dark Presence. The AoE around him that is constantly buffing all starting tier units. So all of your, I've forgotten the names, the Broken Rabble, the Jailers and the Hunters, so your early tier Orcs and the Rabble all gain extra damage. And he also says empowers nearby Dogaldor units. And I believe that is referring to the Dark Presence. Yeah, empowers nearby Dogaldor units. So I honestly don't know what that empowerment does, but I I imagine it's just a it's just a name, not an actual buff. But still, buffing your early tier units, you can actually go Necromancer to begin with, and then just spam basic stuff and actually do really well, because the slow decay is countered by the Necromancer's influence. And also at level 1, he can summon wolves. Now this is not just like with the Master of Laketown, where it's a unit that is summoned and is just decent anyway, who can be upgraded and is permanent. This permanent warg is also a summon from the power of the spawn of Karkaroth, where it can lunge and then heal itself the damage dealt. So not only is it an incredibly powerful unit that can go out, deal damage, starts out level 5, so it's incredibly strong, but can then also heal itself. And this is a thing that can be done at any time, but it can only get 3 at a time. That's the only restriction. You can only have up to 3. But honestly, you normally have 1. It does massive amounts of damage, gets you lots of power points, then it dies, and you make a new one. But the fact you can get 3 of them is incredibly strong as well. And they are not restricted by command points. They do not cost any command points. I'm fairly certain. I'll soon see. But then we have the Abhorred Dread. So similar to Renowned Warrior of Thranduil, this power grows incredibly busted when you reach level 10. So it starts off as just a basic AoE attack that if it kills anything in the area, they turn into Risen Dead, like what we have around us right now. But they are not permanent, they are only temporary summons. But then those dead can fight for you. It's basically a descent ability that not only kills enemies, but then turns them against them. Turns them against their own allies, which is incredibly strong. And at level 6 and level 10 you do even more damage with it. But at rank 8 you can summon a permanent unit of Restless Warriors from the Barrows, which honestly is not that good, it's not that important. It's better to be used just as a damage dealing spell. But yeah, just to test, these wargs are not countered in the command point cap. So you can get all 3 of them included with whatever you're building for your army. Then level 5, similar to Galadriel, and somehow even better, Shapeless Malice becomes incorporeal, so he just goes ethereal. He cannot be touched. He moves super fast. He can just escape all the way back to the fortress without having to actually worry about going back there or being chased. You cannot chase him while he is in this form. However, he can still do his spot as Lord of Wolves. He can still use his Abhorred Dread power. His Dark Presence is still active. The only thing you can't use is Wreathed in Flame, your last power, which is a mini word of power. It's not as menacing as Word of Power, or as well known, but it is still incredibly amazing. It changes his entire character to look like how he does in the movies, which turns him red. It makes him look like his ring mode, and it's beautiful. And then also we come to the fact that his attack is the strongest in the game for a base hero. So before I mentioned a warg normally takes 3 or 4 hits to kill. Well, look what Necromancer can do. 1 hit and it's already almost dead. And this is an AoE attack as well, with a knockback and a sizable AoE. And also, his damage to structures is insane. I'm fairly certain that is at least 200% increased damage to structures, and it's not even mentioned in his kit. Yes, he's a little bit slower than other heroes, but as I mentioned, with Shapeless Malice, there's no reason to ever worry about dying. You are almost always going to get away and live to tell the tale. And even if he does die, he's only 3,000 resources. Thranduil and Galadriel were each 4,000. Necromancer, on the other hand, is only 3,000. You can get him to begin with, and then still make your starting resources, still build your jail, and start spamming infantry and all of that jazz. Now, I'm not including his power level with the fact that he can become the ring hero. I'm not including ring heroes in this, but as well, he is the only hero that can actually willingly accept the ring without having to go and take the ring back to a fortress. The Necromancer is the only one that can just say, here, give me the ring, and I'm now overpowered. And the wolves, instead of summoning wolves, you get to summon Nazgul, which get even more powerful as the more of them you make. Because Abhorrent Dread deals massive increases of damage, and Wreathed in Flame just becomes insane. It basically becomes as dangerous as Word of Power, but also dangerous to yourself, so you've got to be a bit careful with that. And that is why the Necromancer is the #1 hero. There's no doubt in my mind that no hero can really best him in all the categories I've put him into. As a hero killer, he's not that good. As a unit killer, he's decent. But as a faction leader, as a unit buffing machine, and as a way of summoning more units, he is perfect. He is a 10 out of 10 in all 3 categories. And that is why he is #1. And that concludes the video. I hope everyone has enjoyed, and if you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comments down below. If you want to influence what I might do for the next video, such as another top 10 list, leave a comment down below and perhaps subscribe. That might influence me to do a bit, do a little bribery here and there. Get it? But anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Ta-ta for now.